March 1968. Quang Tri Province, 5 kilometers west of Firebase Fuller. The engine quit at 8 feet altitude. Not a sputter, not a warning, just silence. The turbine wound down, and suddenly, 17,000 pounds of Huey helicopter was falling with 28 Marines packed inside. Warrant Officer Michael Barrett had 3 seconds to prevent everyone from dying. This was his second trip into weather that had grounded every other aircraft in I Corps. The first trip, he'd saved 8 wounded Marines. Now the engine had ceased from running without oil, and he was about to crash into the same rice paddy he'd just extracted men from, except this time, the NVA had dialed in their mortars. What happened in those 3 seconds would determine whether 28 men went home or died in Vietnamese mud. But here's what made this flight impossible. Command had explicitly ordered Barrett not to launch. The weather was 0 to 0, ceiling at 150 feet, visibility 200 meters. Every regulation said, don't fly. Barrett flew anyway. For the next 47 minutes, he would break every rule in the aviation manual, and those 28 Marines would be alive because of it. Michael Barrett didn't choose Vietnam. Vietnam chose him. Born in 1941 in Pueblo, Colorado, he was supposed to run his father's hardware store, 3 generations of Barretts sorting nails and mixing paint. His father had flown B-24s over Europe, came home, and built something instead of destroying it. Michael would do the same. He made it through 3 years of college, pre-law, his mother's dream, before the money ran out. His father's heart attack in 1962 buried them in medical bills. Michael came home to help with the store. The draft notice arrived August 1963. 22 years old, 3 credits shy of a degree that might have saved him. His father, who never talked about the war, said only, "Keep your head down and come home." But at Fort Polk, a warrant officer changed everything. You ever think about flying helicopters? Michael had been in an aircraft exactly once, a county fair Cessna when he was 12. But flying meant aviation instead of infantry. It meant having altitude between him and bullets. He applied for flight school the next day. Michael discovered he was good at flying, better than good. He understood instinctively how helicopters wanted to move, how you had to think 3 seconds ahead because a Huey doesn't forgive mistakes. His instructor told him, "You've got natural hands, Barrett, but natural hands get you killed if you think you're invincible." He graduated March 1965. Warrant Officer 1. The Army gave him 3 weeks of leave, just enough time to marry Linda in a small ceremony before shipping him to Vietnam. The heat at Tan Son Nhut hit like a physical wall. 103 degrees with humidity so thick you could drown in it. The smell, jet fuel, open sewers, rotting vegetation, fish sauce, and sweat. Welcome to the war. They paired him with Warrant Officer 3 Roger Grim Simmons, a Tennessee veteran who'd been flying combat since September '64. "Forget what they taught you at Rucker," Grim said during Michael's first flight. "Charlie doesn't care about your manual. You see smoke, assume it's a hot LZ. You hear AKs, you get low or you get dead." The first time Michael took fire, he froze for 3 seconds. Tracers coming through the door, the distinctive AK-47 rattle, the crew chief screaming. Grim just pushed the cyclic forward, and the Huey dove toward the deck at terminal velocity. "You gotta become part of the terrain, Barrett," Grim explained afterward. "They teach you to stay above small arms range at Rucker, right? 500 feet minimum? Bull. In Vietnam, altitude is death. You get low, treetop low, rice paddy low, and you become a hard target." Michael wrote it in his notebook. Altitude is death. But other aircraft commanders preach the opposite. You stay high. You have options. You go low. 1 RPG and you're done. The tension between doctrine and survival was constant. By January 1966, Michael had been shot down twice, both times following regulations, flying at altitude. The second crash almost killed his entire crew. Sitting at the firebase watching his Huey burn, Michael decided, the book gets you killed here. He started flying low, not where anyone could see, just low enough to learn how the Huey responded in ground effect, how to read terrain at speed. Once, he flew underneath telephone lines, just to see if he could judge the clearance. Other pilots started calling him Rattler, because he flew like a snake through grass, low and fast, and impossible to track. The brass didn't like it. After his third unofficial low-altitude supply run, the operations officer warned him, "Barrett, you're going to kill yourself with these crazy approaches. I see you buzzing rice paddies one more time. I'm grounding you." Michael said, "Yes, sir." He kept flying low anyway. By March 1968, the Tet Offensive had proven something terrifying. The NVA could strike anywhere, anytime. In Quang Tri Province, that meant Firebase, Fuller, and surrounding outposts were under constant pressure. The terrain was unforgiving, jungle-covered hills rising to mountains, with the DMZ to the north. The monsoon season turned everything into a fog-shrouded maze. The monsoons didn't just mean rain. They meant clouds, dropping to 50 feet, visibility measured in meters, winds that could flip a Huey on approach. More helicopters were lost to weather and I-Corps than to enemy fire. Standard procedure was simple. Don't fly unless absolutely necessary. Minimum ceiling, 500 feet. If you couldn't see the ground clearly, you didn't go. The problem was, the enemy didn't care about SOPs. The NVA had learned that Americans were dependent on helicopters. Take away the helicopters, and isolated units became death traps. So they attacked during the worst weather, knowing help couldn't come. The Marines at Bulldog 26, 2nd Platoon, Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, were on patrol 4 kilometers west of Firebase Fuller when the weather closed in. Their mission was routine. Sweep the tree line, look for supply caches, extract by helicopter at 1500 hours. But the NVA had been waiting. The ambush hit at 1347 hours. RPGs from the tree line, heavy machine gun fire, mortars walking across the rice paddy. 28 Marines caught in the open. 8 wounded. The platoon commander, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, called for immediate dust-off. Artillery support was minimal. The monsoon rain made target acquisition impossible. Fast movers were grounded. Gunships were grounded. Even Marine helicopters at Dong Ha were grounded. If Bulldog 26 was going to survive, someone would have to fly through weather that command had declared unflyable. The call came into Firebase Fuller's operations center at 1353 hours. Any station. This is Bulldog 26. We are in contact. Heavy casualties. Request immediate dust-off. Weather is 0 to 0. I say again, weather is 0 to 0. Over. The operations officer looked at the weatherboard. Ceiling, 150 feet. Visibility, 200 meters in rain. Every aircraft grounded. Bulldog 26. Be advised all aviation assets are grounded due to weather. Cannot launch dust-off at this time. Over. Negative, negative! Lieutenant Webb's voice strained over automatic weapons fire. We are surrounded. 8 urgent casualties. If we don't get extraction in the next hour, we are all KIA. We need birds now. Michael Barrett was in the operations center drinking burnt coffee when the call came. He walked to the operations map. The rice paddy was in a valley surrounded by hills rising to 300 feet. In good weather, 12 minutes. In this weather, flying through a maze while blindfolded. We've got to launch, Michael said. Major Dennis Kearney shook his head. Negative, Barrett. You launch in this, and you'll fly into a hillside. They've got less than an hour before the NVA overruns them. Then they better pray the weather clears. Michael looked at the map again. The normal approach, following the valley at 500 feet, was impossible. The ceiling was half that. But there was another way. If you flew west along the ridgeline at 50 feet, staying just above the trees, you could follow terrain down into the valley. You'd be flying in near zero visibility. The slightest mistake would kill you. Michael turned to his crew. I'm going. Anyone who wants to stay, no judgment. Specialist Danny Ortega stood up. My guns are clean. PFC Marcus Preacher Williams closed his Bible. The Lord is my shepherd. Co-pilot Jim Holloway, 22 years old, with 47 days in country, was pale but nodded. If you're flying, I'm flying. Major Kearney stepped in front of Michael. Barrett, I am ordering you to stand down. This is not a suggestion. This is a direct order. Then court-martial me when I get back, sir. Michael walked to his helicopter. Major Kearney didn't stop him. At 14:07 hours, Michael Barrett lifted off into weather that should have killed him. The Huey punched into clouds at 100 feet. Visibility went from 200 meters to nothing in seconds. Michael was flying on instruments, artificial horizon, altimeter, heading indicator. But instruments only told you what the aircraft was doing, not what the terrain ahead was doing. Bulldog 26, this is Rattler 15. We are inbound to your position. ETA 15 minutes, over. Rattler, Bulldog. You actually launched? Jesus. Be advised, LZ is hot. We are taking heavy fire. Copy hot, LZ. Keep your heads down, Marines. We're coming. Jim Holloway's voice cracked. Skipper? I can't see anything. How are you planning to navigate? Stay below the clouds and follow the ridge. In this weather? Yeah. Michael pushed forward and descended. The clouds broke at 70 feet and suddenly the world appeared, not clear, but visible through rain. He could see jungle canopy, maybe 100 meters ahead, the ridgeline to his left, and nothing else. He turned west and dropped to 50 feet. The rotor wash kicked up spray from wet vegetation below. At this altitude, at 90 knots, there was no room for error. A slight updraft would slam them into the hillside. A downdraft would drop them into the trees. Altitude 40 feet, Jim called out. Skipper, we're too low. I know. They flew like this for 7 minutes. 50 feet above jungle, 90 knots, visibility measured in seconds of warning. Then, the automatic weapons fire started. Tracers came up from below. Green tracers. AK-47s. NVA shooting blind into rain. Danny opened up with the M60, firing back at muzzle flashes. Taking fire! Michael pushed the nose down and accelerated. The Huey shuddered as rounds punched through aluminum. How bad? Tail booms hit, but we're still flying. They outran the fire. Or got lucky. Michael had no idea which. Bulldog 26, Rattler, 2 minutes out. Pop smoke now. Michael spotted red smoke being hammered down by monsoon. The rice paddy was gray-brown water dotted with Marines hunkered in mud. The tree line beyond erupted with muzzle flashes. Preacher, Danny, when we hover, you light up that tree line. Michael lined up the approach. Nose low, speed bleeding off, dropping toward the mortar-pocked hellscape. 50 feet, 40, 30. We are taking heavy fire. The windscreen starred, an AK round punching through plexiglass between them. Michael felt something hot graze his left arm but kept flying. 20 feet, 10, 5. The Huey came to hover over the rice paddy. Rotor wash created a cyclone of water and mud. Door guns hammered at cyclic rate, brass raining into the cabin. The helicopter shuddered with every hit. Get them on! Marines ran through knee-deep water, dragging wounded. Michael held the hover, fighting wind, feeling every bullet. The engine made a sound it shouldn't make. Loading wounded now. A mortar round hit 20 meters right. Shrapnel pinged off fuselage. Another round left. They were bracketing him. How many on board? 8 wounded. They're still coming. Michael's left arm was bleeding, but both hands stayed on controls. 4 more coming. The minutes stretched. 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. The Huey shook from hits. Gauges showing problems. Oil pressure dropping. Turbine temperature climbing. Last man on board. Go, go, go. Michael pulled collective, full power, maximum climb. The Huey struggled. Overloaded. Trying to lift with damaged engine and holes everywhere. They cleared the rice paddy by 10 feet, the tree line by 15. Bulldog 26, Rattler. We have 8 urgent. Returning to Fuller. Over. Rattler Bulldog. Lieutenant Webb's voice choked. There are still 20 on the ground. Can you come back? Michael looked at his gauges. Oil pressure redlined. Engine temperature critically high. The Huey was dying. But there were 20 Marines still in that rice paddy. After dropping the wounded at Fuller, Michael looked at his crew. Last chance to get off. Danny. My guns still work. Preacher. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Jim. Hands shaking, but jaw set. Let's go get our Marines. At 14:41 hours, Michael Barrett lifted off again. The Huey struggled immediately. The engine was running rough, grinding vibration, hesitation in power response. Blood had soaked through the bandage on his arm. Oil pressure is dropping, Jim called. We're losing oil. How fast? Maybe 30 minutes before it's critical. Then we've got time. They descended back into the gray nightmare, following the same ridgeline west. But this time, Michael knew the terrain. He flew lower, 40 feet, 35, pushing the Huey to fly like it was part of the jungle itself. 3 minutes in, the NVA opened fire again. But this time, they were ready. A coordinated ambush, heavy machine gun fire positioned along the route. Michael had anticipated this. Instead of flying straight into the ambush, he broke right, dropping to 25 feet, flying parallel to the ridgeline through a narrow draw between hills. The world became walls of vegetation 5 meters on each side. One rotor tip strike and they'd cartwheel into trees. "We're too low! We're too low!" Jim was saying it like a prayer. I know. They flanked the ambush position. Below, confused NVA soldiers shot at empty air. Bulldog 2-6, Rattler. Inbound again, 2 minutes. Same drill. Over. Same. Rattler, Bulldog. Be advised. Mortar fire has intensified. NVA is maneuvering for assault. We are down to 15 effectives. LZ is getting smaller. Water is deeper from rain. Over. Michael brought the Huey into hover over the rice paddy at 14:49 hours. Immediately, the world exploded. The NVA had moved 82mm mortars into position. First round hit 10 meters from the nose, spraying windscreen with mud. Second round right. Third left. Loading wounded. Michael held the hover, but the Huey was shaking, not from rotor wash, but from failing engine. Oil pressure in the red. Temperature climbing past limits. He could smell burning oil. An RPG streaked past the tail boom, missing by inches. How many? 6 loaded. More coming. A mortar round hit 15 meters away. Shrapnel punched through aluminum. Preacher grunted, hit in the leg but still firing. Preacher's hit. Keep loading. The Huey shuddered. Something in the engine made a grinding sound that meant metal touching metal without oil. "We've got maybe 60 seconds, Jim shouted. Then they've got 60 seconds. Marines ran through thigh-deep water, dragging wounded. Michael could see Lieutenant Webb directing traffic, exposing himself to enemy fire. Engine oil pressure, 0. "Mike, we have to go now, or we're not going at all." Michael looked back. 6 wounded on board. 8 more Marines running toward the helicopter. 8 more still in the paddy. The engine was dying. If it seized while hovering, they'd fall into the rice paddy, too heavy to get back off the ground. But if he left now, those 8 running toward him would die. "Load them all. Everyone gets on. We'll be overweight. Then we'll be overweight. 30 seconds. Marines climbing aboard, filling every space, some hanging on skids. 20 seconds. A mortar round hit where they'd been hovering 10 seconds earlier. 10 seconds. Last Marine grabbed the skid. "Everyone's on." Michael pulled collective, full power, every ounce the dying engine could give. The Huey shook violently, skids breaking free of mud suction. They began to climb. 1 foot per second, 2 feet per second. At 8 feet altitude, the engine quit, not dramatically, not explosively, just stopped. The turbine wound down, rotor RPM began to decay, and suddenly they were 17,000 pounds of metal hanging in air with nothing but momentum. Michael's training took over instantly. Auto-rotation, the emergency procedure, every helicopter pilot practices but hopes never to use. He pushed the nose forward to maintain rotor RPM, lowered the collective, aimed for the only clear space, the rice paddy they'd just left. "Hold on." The Huey descended in a controlled fall. Marines in back were screaming or praying. Jim was frozen. Danny and Preacher had stopped shooting, just holding on. 40 feet from impact, Michael pulled back on the cyclic to flare the helicopter, bleeding off forward speed. The nose came up, tail dropped. 20 feet, 10 feet. At 5 feet, he pulled collective, using stored energy in the spinning rotor to cushion the landing. The Huey hit the water hard, skid sinking into deep mud. Water rushed through open doors. The helicopter tilted left, almost rolling, but they were down. Alive. Stuck in mud. Overloaded. Surrounded by enemy, but alive. "Everybody out. We're too heavy to lift, even if the engine restarts." Marines bailed into waist-deep water. Wounded were pulled out, carried toward the tree line on the south side. Michael tried the engine restart. Nothing. The turbine was seized, metal welded to metal. They abandoned the helicopter and ran. 28 men, 14 wounded. 1 dead helicopter. NVA closing from 3 sides. Lieutenant Webb collapsed next to Michael, mud-covered and exhausted. Well, that's one way to join a party. What's the situation? NVA is about 100 meters north and west, but they haven't pressed the assault. I think they're confused about the helicopter. Michael looked at his watch. 15:02 hours. The clouds were starting to break. Shafts of sunlight cutting through monsoon for the first time in hours. If the weather's clearing, we can call in real air support. Webb keyed his radio. Fuller Ops, Bulldog 2-6. We are consolidated at new position. Helicopter is down, but all personnel extracted. Request immediate gunship and medevac support. Weather appears clearing. Over. For 17 minutes, they waited. The NVA probed the perimeter twice, but didn't commit to full assault. They were waiting, too, for weather to close back in, or for darkness. Then they heard it. The distinctive whop, whop, whop of Huey rotors. Not 1, but 3 helicopters, 2 slicks, and a gunship, flying at 500 feet where clouds had finally lifted. Bulldog 2-6. This is Python 1-5. We have your position. Gunship will suppress, then will extract. Pop smoke, over. Webb popped purple smoke. The Cobra made its run. Miniguns and rockets tearing into the tree line. Enemy fire died instantly. The 2 slicks landed hard. Marines ran, carrying wounded, dragging each other, everyone moving, despite exhaustion. Michael and his crew went last, making sure every Marine got on before they boarded. At 15:24 hours, the extraction helicopters lifted off. Behind them, Michael could see his Huey sitting at an angle in mud, rotors drooping, already being approached by NVA soldiers. They flew east at 500 feet, where helicopters were supposed to fly, where you could see terrain and threats and had time to react. It felt impossibly safe after flying at 30 feet. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say that hadn't been said by surviving. When Firebase Fuller appeared ahead, Michael felt nothing. Not relief, not pride, just exhaustion. They landed at 15:31 hours. Exactly 1 hour and 24 minutes after Michael had first launched into weather that should have killed him. By 1600 hours, 14 wounded Marines were being stabilized. Michael's shrapnel-torn left arm was being stitched. Major Kearney found him in the aid station. Barrett, sir, you disobeyed a direct order. You flew an aircraft that was clearly unsafe, in weather that was clearly unsafe, violating every operational procedure we have. Yes, sir. Kearney paused. You also saved 28 Marines who would be dead right now if you'd followed those procedures. The official after-action report recorded, 1A Michael Barrett conducted unauthorized medical evacuation flight in weather below operational minimums, resulting in successful extraction of 28 personnel. Aircraft sustained Category 5 damage and was abandoned. Pilot demonstrated exceptional airmanship and disregard for personal safety. Recommended for Valor Award and for counseling regarding adherence to operational procedures. It was Vietnam, in one paragraph. Heroism and disobedience occupying the same sentence. 3 days later, the battalion commander called Michael to his office. Lieutenant Webb has requested you receive the Medal of Honor. I told him that's unlikely given the circumstances. I don't want a medal, sir. What do you want? I want to know that next time weather's bad and someone needs help, I'm allowed to go get them. That's the problem, isn't it? If I officially approve what you did, I'm telling pilots regulations don't matter. But if I disapprove, I'm telling them we abandon our people when conditions get difficult. Michael received the Distinguished Flying Cross 6 weeks later. The citation mentioned extraordinary heroism and exceptional airmanship. It did not mention disobeying orders, violating weather minimums, or flying an unsafe aircraft. Michael put the medal in a drawer and didn't look at it again for 27 years. Michael Barrett's Deros date was June 23, 1969. The flight back to the world was on a commercial 707. Other passengers, civilians, businessmen, avoided looking at the soldiers. The stewardess served drinks with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. They landed at Travis Air Force Base at 0300 hours. Michael walked off wearing his uniform with the Distinguished Flying Cross visible. A small group of protesters was waiting. Baby killer. Michael walked past them, He'd flown 847 combat missions. He'd pulled out 127 wounded soldiers and Marines. And this was his homecoming. He took a taxi to San Francisco, changed into civilian clothes in the bathroom, and threw his uniform in the trash. His parents met him at Denver. His mother cried. His father hugged him once, hard, and said, "You made it." Linda was waiting in Pueblo. They'd been married 4 years and spent 8 months of that together. "You're so thin," she said. "Yeah. Are you okay?" "Yeah." He wasn't. For 6 months, Michael tried. He worked at his father's hardware store, sold hammers and paint, pretended to be normal. At night, he'd wake at 0200, heart racing, listening for mortar fire that wasn't coming. Linda tried to understand. "Tell me about it. Maybe talking will help. But how do you explain what it felt like to fly at 30 feet in zero visibility with 28 lives depending on you not making a mistake? How do you explain that you miss it, not the war, but the clarity, the purpose?" The nightmares were always the same. Flying into clouds that turned into walls. The engine, quitting, falling, always falling. He started drinking. Enough to quiet the memories, enough to sleep. In 1972, Linda left. "I love you, Michael, but I can't keep living with whoever you were in Vietnam." She was right. Michael knew she was right, but he didn't know how to come back from there. In 1978, the VA started recognizing post-traumatic stress disorder. Michael read the description: intrusive memories, hypervigilance, nightmares, difficulty maintaining relationships. Every symptom was him. He went to the VA hospital. The psychiatrist, himself a Vietnam veteran, said, "What you're feeling is normal for what you experienced. Does it get better? It gets different. You learn to carry it better." Michael started therapy. Started talking, finally, about the flight in March 1968. "You saved 28 men, the psychiatrist said. "I was just doing my job." "No, your job was to follow regulations. You chose to do what was right instead. There's a difference." It helped. Not completely. Not enough to erase nightmares or guilt, but enough to function, enough to live. The U.S. Army never officially adopted Michael Barrett's ultra-low altitude weather penetration technique. The regulations remained. 500 feet minimum altitude, 1 mile visibility. These rules were written in blood and common sense. Most pilots who tried to fly at treetop level in zero visibility died doing it. But unofficially, the knowledge spread. Fort Rucker never taught the Barrett technique, but instructors who'd served in Vietnam would tell the story, not as recommended procedure, but as an example of impossible decisions combat sometimes requires. "There are rules," one instructor told a class in 1975, "and then there's being willing to die to save your people." Barrett followed the second instead of the first. He got lucky. Most pilots who try that don't. But understand, sometimes the book will get everyone killed, and you have to decide in 3 seconds whether this is one of those times. In 1991, during the Gulf War, a Navy helicopter pilot flew below minimums through a sandstorm to rescue a downed F-16 pilot. His after-action report included a footnote. Reference Barrett, M. DFC, RVN, 1968. Demonstrated feasibility of ultra-low altitude extraction in zero visibility conditions. The method had entered military aviation lore, not as doctrine but as proof that sometimes the impossible was just barely possible. In 2015, at age 74, Michael attended a 229th Assault Helicopter Battalion reunion. Lieutenant Webb was there, now retired Marine Colonel Marcus Webb, 68, walking with a cane from wounds taken that day. "Rattler," Webb said, gripping Michael's hand. "You know, every single time people ask about my combat experience, I tell them about that rice paddy and the crazy warrant officer who flew through a monsoon to get us. How many of the 28 are still alive? 19. We lost 3 in later combat, 6 to various causes after, but 19 made it, had families, had lives they wouldn't have had. That's because of you." At the reunion dinner, a younger man approached, Captain Dave Thompson, 160th SOAR. "Chief Warrant Officer Barrett, your March 68 flight is part of our unit's unofficial training history. When we're teaching extreme weather operations, Instructors reference what you did as proof that it can be done. It nearly killed me, Michael said. I know. That's part of the lesson. It can be done, but the cost might be everything. How do you decide when it's worth it? Michael thought about 28 Marines in a rice paddy, about the engine seizing at 8 feet, about 50 years of nightmares. When the alternative is watching people die that you could have saved, he said finally, when you know you could try, even if trying might kill you too, that's when you go. Michael Barrett lives in Pueblo, Colorado. He's 84 years old now. He still has nightmares about the engine failure. He still wakes up reaching for controls that aren't there. He doesn't consider himself a hero. Heroes, he'll tell you, are the men who didn't make it home. But to 19 men now in their 70s, scattered across America, Michael Barrett is the reason they got to grow old, the reason they had families, careers, grandchildren, the reason they got to live lives beyond that rice paddy in Quang Tri Province. Sometimes late at night, he takes out that metal data plate from Huey, 67-17-201, holds it, remembers the feel of controls, the sound of the engine, the weight of responsibility. What would you have done with a dying helicopter and 28 Marines depending on you? Could you have flown at 30 feet through zero visibility, knowing one mistake meant death for everyone aboard? Would you have disobeyed direct orders because following them meant watching men die? Michael Barrett did. And 19 men are alive today because of that choice. This story raises harder questions. When is breaking the rules justified? How do we honor soldiers who did extraordinary things in a war that was wrong? How do we measure the value of 28 saved lives against the cost of 50 years of nightmares? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you served in Vietnam or know someone who did, let us know. Because sometimes courage and controversy can coexist. Because soldiers deserve honor, even when wars don't. Because these men fought for each other, even when they questioned why they were there. And because Michael Barrett, at 26 years old, decided that some things, like the lives of 28 Marines, were worth dying for, even if the war itself wasn't. That's the complexity of Vietnam. That's the courage that still deserves our recognition. That's why this story needed to be told.